If you'd asked me 6 months ago what the weirdest thing my roommate had ever said to me was, I probably would have said it was the time he admitted he didn't know how to use a can opener. But then one night, completely out of nowhere, he looked me dead in the eye and asked, "Do you think I'm attractive?" Just like that. No build-up, no context. Like, we were talking about the weather. I laughed at first. I thought he was messing with me. I mean, I'm gay and he's straight. Emphasis on straight. We've lived together since the start of the school year, and not once had he ever even hinted at anything remotely flirtatious. He was always the guy who dated girls, watched football, and left protein shake bottles in the sink. So when he dropped that question while we were sitting in our living room half watching some mindless cooking competition show, I just shook my head and said, "What?" He didn't repeat it, he just stared at me. And that's when I realized he wasn't joking. Let me rewind a bit. Eli and I ended up roommates through mutual friends. I just moved back into the city for grad school, and he needed someone to split the rent after his previous roommate bailed. I didn't know much about him when we moved in together. He was tall, kind of rugged in that boy next door way, always wearing baseball caps and those stupid cut-off tees that made his arms look ridiculous. I had to train myself early on not to look too long when he walked around shirtless. Not that he noticed or cared. We got along surprisingly well. He was easy to talk to, cooked decent meals, didn't mind when I played music too loud while working. We weren't best friends, but we were chill, comfortable, and I liked that. It was easy, until that night. "You didn't answer," he said. I blinked, still unsure if this was some kind of trap. "Why do you want to know?" Eli shrugged. "Just curious." That was his favorite phrase when he didn't want to explain something. Just curious. Like when he asked if almond milk tasted different from regular milk, or if I'd ever worn eyeliner. Now he was using it to ask if I thought he was hot. I put down the beer I'd been nursing. "Look, are you fishing for compliments? Or—" "I'm serious," he said. "Do you?" I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe because I didn't want to make it weird. Maybe because admitting it out loud felt like crossing some invisible line. But we were already past that point, weren't we? So I exhaled and said, "Yeah, Eli, you're attractive." There was a beat of silence. His eyes didn't leave mine. Like, attractive. Attractive? What does that even mean? I asked, my voice dry. Like, if I wasn't straight, would you be into me? I stared at him. "Is this a game?" "No," he said. And this time, his voice was different. Quieter. "It's not." Something twisted in my chest. Because for the first time since we'd moved in together, Eli looked unsure of himself, like he wasn't totally confident in the answer, like he needed to hear it. I wasn't sure what was happening, if he was questioning something, if he was drunk, if he was lonely. I just knew that the air between us felt heavier than it had a second ago. "You want the truth?" I asked. He nodded once. I leaned back against the couch cushion. "Yeah, man, if you weren't straight, I'd totally be into you." And just like that, he smiled. But it wasn't a smug smile. It wasn't that cocky, self-satisfied grin he used when he won at FIFA or got a girl's number. It was softer, almost like relief. "Okay," he said. "Cool." Then he went back to watching the show like nothing happened. But for me, everything suddenly felt a whole lot more complicated. After that night, something changed. Not in a big, dramatic way. Eli didn't start flirting with me or walking around in a towel on purpose or anything. If anything, he acted like the whole thing had never happened. Same casual jokes, same hoodie rotation, same annoying habit of leaving exactly one sip of orange juice in the carton like some kind of sociopath. But for me, everything felt different. I couldn't stop thinking about that smile, the way he looked when I told him the truth, like he needed to hear it, like it mattered. I replayed it in my head way more than I should have. At work, while brushing my teeth, while pretending to scroll through social media at night. I didn't want it to mean something. I didn't want to catch feelings for someone who wasn't available, but I already had. The next few days were weird. Not bad, just off. He'd linger a little longer in conversations, ask more personal questions. Stuff like, "What was your first kiss like?" or "How did you know you were gay?" Things he never asked before. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to figure something out. And then one night, it got worse. I'd just gotten out of the shower, wearing pajama pants and an old t-shirt, towel drying my hair when he knocked on my bedroom door. "Hey," he said, leaning against the frame. "You busy?" "Not really," I said, tossing the towel over the back of my chair. "What's up?" He looked hesitant. Eli never looked hesitant. "You remember what you said the other night?" he asked. I paused. "Yeah, about me being attractive." "Yeah, I remember." He stepped into the room slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. "Do you think it's weird that I asked you that?" That caught me off guard. "I mean, a little," Eli nodded, biting the inside of his cheek like he was trying to keep something in. "I didn't ask because I needed an ego boost." "Okay, I asked because—" He looked down at his hands. "I don't know. Lately I've been thinking about stuff I never used to think about." My heartbeat picked up. "What kind of stuff?" He glanced at me, then looked away again. "I don't know. Like how I feel around you. How sometimes I catch myself wondering what it would be like if I wasn't straight." I felt my stomach twist. "You think you're not?" Eli let out a slow breath. "I don't know what I am." That silence afterward was brutal. It stretched between us like a live wire. I sat down on the edge of my bed, trying to think of something helpful to say, something that wouldn't make it worse. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," I said finally. "It's not a test." He laughed a little, dry and humorless. "I feel like it is. You don't owe anyone an answer, not even me." His eyes met mine again, and this time there was no teasing, no grin, just something raw. "I keep thinking about what you said, that if I wasn't straight, you'd be into me." "Yeah?" I said, my voice quiet. "I think I'm into you," he said. And just like that, the bottom dropped out of my stomach. I stared at him, frozen. My brain scrambled, for context, for clarity, but all I could focus on were those words. That he said them like he didn't even mean to, like they just slipped out. "You don't have to say stuff like that to figure yourself out," I said cautiously. "If this is just part of you testing some theory—" "It's not," he said quickly. "I mean, maybe it started that way. I don't know, I think about you all the time. And not in a roommate way. Not in a pass the remote kind of way. It's more like, I think about what it would be like if I could hold your hand. Or kiss you. Or wake up next to you. And that's messed up, right?" "No," I said, my throat tight. "That's not messed up." He stepped closer. "So I'm not crazy?" I shook my head. "No, you're not crazy." He sat down beside me, close enough that our knees brushed. "You ever have something sneak up on you? Like, you didn't see it coming, but once it's there, it's all you can think about?" "Yeah," I said. "That's exactly how it feels." We sat like that for a while, not touching, not speaking, just letting the air buzz between us like a quiet charge. I don't know how long we stayed that way. Could have been a minute, could have been an hour. Eventually he stood up. "I'm gonna go to bed." "Okay." He walked to the door, then paused. "Thanks for not making this weird." I gave him a soft smile. "Too late for that." He laughed under his breath and disappeared down the hall. When I finally crawled into bed, my mind was a mess. I couldn't decide if I felt hopeful or terrified or both. All I knew was, the next few days were going to change everything. One way or another. The next morning was awkward in a way that only almost confessions can be. You know, when two people tiptoe around the thing that was said but pretend like it wasn't. Eli was already in the kitchen when I came out of my room, nursing a mug of coffee and scrolling through his phone like he hadn't casually admitted he might want to kiss me 8 hours earlier. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Hey." I grabbed my own mug from the cabinet, but I could feel his eyes on me now, tracking my every move like he was studying a wild animal he wasn't sure would bolt or bite. "You sleep okay?" he asked. I nodded. "You?" He gave a non-committal shrug. "Weird dreams." I didn't ask. He didn't offer. And that was kind of the rhythm we settled into for the rest of the day, circling each other, neither of us willing to be the one who broke the silence again. Later that afternoon, he left to hit the gym, and I found myself pacing the apartment like I was stuck in a holding pattern. Every time I tried to distract myself with work, I ended up staring at the same blank Illustrator file, cursor blinking like it was mocking me. I kept replaying his words in my head. "I think I'm into you." He hadn't said he wasn't straight. He hadn't said he was. He hadn't said much of anything, really, but the weight of it lingered like cigarette smoke in the room, impossible to ignore once it's in your lungs. He got back a little before sunset, damp hair, sweaty t-shirt, gym bag slung over his shoulder. I looked up from the couch, pretending I hadn't been waiting. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah." "You?" Eli hesitated. "Can we talk?" I muted the TV. "Of course." He set his bag down and dropped into the armchair across from me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He looked like he was bracing for impact. "Last night," he said. "I meant what I said." I nodded slowly. "Okay, I don't know what that means yet. I'm not suddenly sure of everything. I'm still figuring it out. But I know I wasn't lying." My chest tightened. "You don't have to apologize for figuring things out." "I'm not apologizing," he said. I don't want to mess this up. Whatever this is. With you." That hit harder than I expected. Because, yeah, I wanted something to happen. But I also didn't want to become his experiment. The guy he tested a theory on, and then walked away from when it didn't fit. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "But I need to be honest too. This isn't a game for me. If we go down this road, I'm not going to be the guy you try out. I've done that. It sucks. It hurts." Eli nodded like he'd expected that. "I'm not trying to use you." "Then what are you trying to do?" He rubbed his hands over his face, sighed. "Figure out what this feeling is that won't go away." I stayed quiet, giving him space to think, or maybe stall. After a minute, he looked up. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "If I kissed you right now, would that be crossing a line?" I felt my breath catch. Not in a romantic, fireworks kind of way. In a holy shit, this is happening way. "That depends," I said. "On what?" "On whether you'd mean it." His eyes didn't leave mine. I would. It was probably stupid. Probably messy. But I said, "Then no, it wouldn't cross a line." Eli stood up slowly, walked over to where I was still sitting on the couch. He looked unsure, a little unsteady, like he wasn't used to not knowing what came next. I tilted my head back to meet his eyes. "You don't have to do anything." "I want to." And then, finally, he leaned down and kissed me. It was gentle, hesitant, like he was learning how to do it from scratch. But it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like he was trying to prove anything. It felt real. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine for a second, both of us quiet, breathing like we'd just run a mile. "That okay?" he asked. I nodded, heart pounding. "Yeah, that was okay." He smiled, small and crooked, and sat down beside me, this time closer. His thigh pressed against mine. Not accidental, not subtle. "I've never done that before," he admitted. I could tell. "Was it that bad?" I laughed. "You're a solid C+ kisser." He shoved me playfully, face flushed. "Dick." We stayed like that for a long time, not talking much, not needing to, just letting the newness of it settle over us like dust. Everything felt quiet and loud at the same time. Eventually, Eli spoke again. "So what now?" I looked at him. "Now? You take a shower. You smell like a gym floor." He laughed, leaning his head back against the couch. Deal. But after that? I hesitated. We figure it out. Together. Eli nodded, smile still playing on his lips. Yeah, I'd like that. And I think, for the first time since this whole thing started, he meant it. We didn't talk about the kiss again that night. Eli did go shower, and I stayed on the couch, staring at the paused screen of some dumb cooking show we weren't even watching. I wasn't thinking about the food, or the TV, or the fact that I was starving. I was thinking about how quiet the apartment felt all of a sudden. Not awkward quiet. Anticipatory quiet. Like that moment just before a thunderstorm hits. The air heavy, expectant. When he came out of the bathroom, his hair was damp, his skin still pink from the heat. He had on a hoodie and sweats, his usual post-shower uniform, and he looked normal. Exactly like he always did. Except now, I knew what his lips tasted like. He sat next to me again. Not as close as before, but not far. He smelled like eucalyptus body wash and something warm I couldn't quite name. We didn't say anything for a while, just sat side by side. Like the kiss had folded itself into our space, invisible but very much there. Eventually, he broke the silence. I've never kissed a guy before. I glanced over. Yeah? He nodded, looking down at his hands. I always thought about what it'd feel like, but I never let myself try. And now? He looked up at me, and there was something different in his eyes, a weight that hadn't been there before. Now I can't stop thinking about it. That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Not because I was falling for him. Okay, I was, but because I could tell he was at the edge of something. And I didn't know if he'd jump or back away slowly and pretend it never happened. You don't have to rush anything, I said, voice low. It's not a race. I know. He leaned back against the couch, exhaling slowly. I don't know where I land on the whole label thing. I don't feel like I'm gay. I still like girls. But when I kissed you, it didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel confusing. I nodded. Maybe you don't need a label. He gave a dry laugh. Tell that to literally everyone else in the world. Fuck everyone else. That made him grin. That's very you. I mean it, I said. Whatever you figure out, it's yours. You don't owe anyone a performance. Least of all me. His eyes softened. You've been really cool about all of this. I shrugged. Trying not to be an asshole is kind of my whole thing. I'm serious, he said. Most people would have laughed. Or gotten weird. Most people suck. He nudged my knee with his. You don't. I felt heat crawl up my neck, and I looked away, pretending to be really interested in the remote sitting on the coffee table. You're blushing, he said. Shut up. He chuckled, then went quiet again. A comfortable quiet, this time. The kind that didn't need filling. That was kind of the rhythm we fell into after that night. Nothing official, no big declarations. Just something between us. Some shift. Eli still went on dates with girls. I still tried to pretend I wasn't keeping tabs on every one of them. But at night, sometimes, he'd sit a little closer on the couch, let his leg brush against mine and not move it. Sometimes, I'd catch him staring. And sometimes, every now and then, he'd kiss me again. Always soft, always hesitant, like he was still testing the edges of something he didn't want to break. It went on like that for a couple weeks, this weird, careful dance, half in, half out. And even though I knew I was playing with fire, I couldn't bring myself to pull away. Until one night, it all came to a head. We were out with a couple of our friends, including this girl he'd been seeing off and on. She was cute, funny, had that effortless confidence that made her feel like the center of gravity in any room. They weren't exclusive, he said, but that didn't make it sting less when I saw her lean in and whisper something in his ear at the bar. His eyes flicked toward me then. Quick, like he hadn't meant to, like he wanted to see if I was watching. I was. I left early, didn't say goodbye. Just texted him I wasn't feeling great, and caught the last train home. I knew it wasn't fair. We'd never talked about what this was. We hadn't put any labels on it. But seeing him with her, laughing, flirting, being so easy with her, it knocked the breath out of me. When I got home, I didn't turn the lights on. Just collapsed onto the couch and stared at the ceiling, trying to talk myself down. You knew what this was. You knew he wasn't yours. You knew it could end before it began. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is the door unlocking and Eli walking in. His footsteps were light, careful, like he wasn't sure if I was asleep. I sat up. "Hey!" He looked startled. "Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't." He dropped his keys into the bowl by the door and stood there for a second, like he was deciding what to say. "You left kind of fast." "Wasn't feeling great." He hesitated. "Was it because of Olivia?" I didn't answer, didn't know how to. "She kissed me," he said, "just for the record." "Cool." I didn't kiss her back. That made me look up. "I couldn't," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "All I could think about was you." And just like that, the air in the room changed. "I don't want this to be a game," I said quietly. "I can't be a secret, Eli. I can't be your in-between." He crossed the room slowly and sat beside me on the couch. "You're not. Then what am I?" He looked at me, eyes full of something I couldn't name. "You're the only thing that feels real right now." My heart hammered in my chest. "I don't have all the answers yet," he said, "but I want to figure them out with you." I didn't say anything for a long moment, just leaned forward and kissed him. Not soft this time, not hesitant. And this time, he kissed me back like he meant it. That kiss was different. It wasn't like the other ones, tentative, testing, barely there. This one had weight. Intention. He kissed me like he was done tiptoeing around it, like he'd finally stopped caring whether or not he understood it all, and I kissed him back like I'd been waiting for it. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing a little harder than we should have been, like something real had just passed between us that neither of us knew how to hold on to yet. Eli didn't say anything right away. His forehead was still resting lightly against mine, his hands warm on my thighs, and I could feel the tension in his shoulders, like he was bracing for the fallout. "I meant that," he said eventually. "All of it." I just nodded. "I know." We didn't sleep in the same bed that night. There was no sudden rush of clothes or hands or anything like that. But we also didn't go back to pretending. He stayed in my room for a while. We sat on the floor, backs against the wall, legs stretched out, talking about nothing and everything. He told me about a time in high school when he'd had a weird moment with a friend on a camping trip, how he'd buried it because it didn't make sense, how he always just figured he liked girls and that was the end of the story. "I still do," he said, "but now I think I was just scared to leave that box." I didn't push him, didn't try to define him or corner him into explaining things he wasn't ready to unpack. I just sat there with him, legs brushing, arms occasionally bumping, and tried to make space for whatever was growing between us. After a while, he yawned and said, "I should sleep." I nodded. "Yeah." He stood up, looked down at me like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to say something else, and then he just leaned down and kissed me again, quick, soft, like it was becoming a habit. "Night," he said, "night." And then he left, and I lay there in the dark staring at the ceiling, wondering if it was actually happening, if I was really falling for my straight roommate, except maybe he wasn't so straight anymore. The next few days were surreal. He didn't backtrack, didn't get weird or distant or pretend like it never happened. In fact, he was the one who kept seeking me out, sitting closer on the couch, hanging around the kitchen while I worked, asking how my day was, actually listening. We didn't call it anything, but it felt like something. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when I could tell he was still figuring it all out. Little hesitations in his touch, quick glances when he thought I wasn't looking. But he kept showing up, kept choosing to be near me. That meant something. One night, we ended up on the roof of our building. It wasn't really a rooftop lounge or anything, just a flat, tar-covered space we weren't technically supposed to be on. But we discovered it during our second week of living there and had been using it as a secret hangout spot ever since. We brought up a couple of beers and a blanket and just lay there, staring up at the sky. It was cold, not freezing, but enough that Eli shifted closer, pulled the blanket around us both, and rested his arm behind my shoulders. Not possessive. Not dramatic. Just there. "You ever think about how weird this is?" he said after a while. "All the time." He laughed softly. "Not in a bad way. Just never thought I'd be here. With you. Like this." I looked over at him. "Do you regret it?" His eyes met mine, steady. "No. Do you?" Not for a second. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath. Good. A long silence settled in after that. The kind that only exists between people who've spent a lot of time not saying what they really want. I knew he was still wrestling with it all, how he felt, what it meant, what to call it. And I knew better than to rush it, but part of me couldn't help but want more. I was already in. All the way. And some days, I wasn't sure if he'd ever be able to meet me there. That doubt started to eat at me. Especially the night we went to a friend's party together. A small get-together, 10, maybe 12 people. But there were enough unfamiliar faces that I stayed close to Eli without thinking about it. He didn't pull away, didn't act different. But he also didn't do anything that would make anyone think we were more than friends. At one point, I stepped outside for air. It was too warm inside, the laughter too loud, the space too tight. I needed a second. Eli found me a few minutes later. "You okay?" "Yeah, just needed a break." He stood beside me, hands in his pockets. "You disappeared," I shrugged. "Didn't want to be in the way." He looked confused. "In the way of what?" I didn't answer. He tilted his head. "Hey, talk to me." I hesitated. "Do you ever think about saying something? Telling people?" He knew what I meant. Of course he did. He sighed. "It's not that simple." "I know. But I also can't keep being your secret forever." Eli rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm not ready." "I get that," I said. "But I need to know if you're going to be, ever." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And something in his face cracked open a little. "I want to be," he said. "I don't know how, but I want to." That was the first time I believed him. And it was the first time I realized I might actually be falling in love with him. That conversation outside the party stuck with me. Not because it was everything I wanted to hear, but because it wasn't. Eli didn't promise me clarity or commitment or anything clean, but he gave me honesty, and that felt like the most important part. For once, he wasn't hiding behind casual touches or half steps. He said he wanted to figure it out. With me. And for a while, that was enough. The following weeks had a rhythm to them. Subtle, careful, but increasingly intimate. Eli started pulling me into longer hugs, holding on to me a second too long before letting go. And sometimes, when we were alone, he'd look at me like he was working up the courage to say something big, but never did. We didn't go public. Not in any real way. To everyone else, we were still just roommates who happened to spend a lot of time together, who shared food, walked to the gym at the same time, sometimes watched movies way too late into the night. No one thought much of it, but when the apartment door closed and it was just us, he'd lie next to me on the couch, press his knee into mine, let his fingers graze my wrist and stay there. Every touch was deliberate, like he needed the contact but was still afraid to ask for more than that. And I let him, even though it was quiet, even though I was still afraid that one day he'd wake up and walk away from all of it. But then something happened that neither of us could ignore. It was a Thursday night. I remember that because I was halfway through editing a client's project when he came home late from class. His hair was windblown, face pink from the cold, hoodie damp from the rain. He looked tired, more than tired, worn out. I didn't say anything right away. Just looked up from my laptop and gave him a small smile. He dropped his backpack by the door and walked straight over to me, no hesitation, no warning. Then he kissed me. Not one of those hesitant, fleeting kisses like before. This one was slow, intense. His hands cupped my face. My laptop hit the floor with a soft thud I didn't care about. When he pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine. "I want this," he said. "All of it." I stared at him, stunned. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure about anything." He kissed me again before I could answer. Later, we sat in my bed, legs tangled, lights low. No TV, no distractions, just us. "I've been thinking about this for weeks," he said. "About you, about how I feel." "And?" I asked, heart pounding. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to hide it. I'm tired of pretending I don't think about you when we're not together. I'm tired of stopping myself from texting you every time something reminds me of you. I'm tired of being scared." I couldn't breathe. "I don't know what I am," he said, voice cracking a little. "I'm still figuring that out, but I know I want you." He reached for my hand and held it like he was afraid I'd pull away. I didn't. "I want that too," I said quietly. "I've wanted it for a long time." He let out a breath, like he'd been holding it for months. "Then let's stop dancing around it." And that's exactly what we did. The next day, he kissed me on the forehead before he left for class. He didn't say anything, just did it like it was normal, like it was always supposed to be that way. And from that moment on, it was. The first person we told was Jules, my best friend. She stared at me across the table at our favorite Thai place and said, "Wait, like Eli? Eli?" I nodded. "Yeah." "Your roommate?" "Yep." She leaned in, eyes wide. "And he's not straight?" I shrugged. "Apparently not completely." She stared for a second, then broke into a grin. "Well, it's about damn time." Eli was nervous about telling anyone else. But little by little, it happened. He didn't come out with a big announcement. There were no social media posts, no dramatic declarations. Just small steps. Sitting closer, brushing my hand and not pulling away. Eventually, he started introducing me as someone special. That was his term, not boyfriend, not yet. But it meant something. And then one night, about a month later, we were lying in bed, wrapped in the quiet kind of darkness that makes people honest. "I think I'm falling for you," he whispered, like it was the first time he was saying it out loud. My heart stopped. "Eli?" He looked over at me, nervous. "Too soon?" I shook my head. "Not even close." "Good," he said, "because I don't think I can take it back." I leaned over and kissed him. "You don't have to." I didn't sleep much that night. I just lay there, holding him, memorizing the weight of his arm over my chest, the soft rise and fall of his breath. I thought about the first time I saw him, half asleep, messy-haired, shirtless, asking if we had any more cereal. I thought about the first time he said he might not be as straight as he thought. I thought about how I'd gone into this living situation just hoping for someone who wouldn't leave dishes in the sink. And instead, I found this. Him. Us. Something I never saw coming, but now couldn't imagine living without. The strange thing about falling for someone who used to think they were straight is that it doesn't feel different, at least not in the day-to-day. It just feels like falling in love. We still lived in the same apartment, split chores, argued about groceries, passed each other in our tiny hallway brushing teeth at the same time. But now, there were kisses, lingering touches, quiet moments in the kitchen when he'd come up behind me, wrap his arms around my waist and rest his chin on my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because by that point, it was. We hadn't put labels on anything, not officially. I never asked him to say he was gay or bi or pan. I knew he was still figuring it out, and I didn't need to rush him into defining himself. But he was sure about me. That part, he kept saying, was never confusing. Some nights, we'd lie in bed and talk until 2 a.m, tangled up in sheets and each other. He told me about the parts of his life he'd never said out loud before, the times he thought maybe he'd felt something for a guy, but had pushed it away, convinced himself it was a fluke, a phase. "I thought everyone had those moments," he said one night, staring up at the ceiling. "I didn't know it could mean something." "I think most people do have moments," I said. "But for us, it wasn't a moment, it was a pull." He looked at me. "Yeah, that's what it felt like gravity. The longer we were together, the easier it got. That weird tension we used to tiptoe around was gone, replaced by a kind of ease I'd never really felt with anyone else. We were just good together. And as much as I hated the idea of jinxing anything, I started to believe this could actually be real, long-term real. It wasn't always smooth. There were moments where he'd get quiet after someone gave us a look in public, or when someone from his old friend group would text him and he'd hesitate before replying. It wasn't shame, not exactly, but it was unfamiliarity, a new version of himself that he was still getting used to. One night, we were walking back from the store, arms full of takeout, when he slowed down suddenly. "What?" I asked, shifting the bag in my hand. He stopped on the sidewalk, under one of those dim orange streetlights that made everything feel softer, quieter. "I haven't told my mom," he said. I paused. "Okay. I want to. I don't know how." I looked at him, really looked at him. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I think I am." He was quiet for a second, then added, "Would you come with me when I do?" My heart did something weird. Of course. He didn't tell her that week. Or the next. But the idea was out there, and I could see him circling it, getting closer. And even though part of me worried about what her reaction would be, I also knew this was something he needed to do for himself. When he finally did it, it was a Sunday afternoon. We drove 2 hours to his parents' house, and the whole time, he held my hand in the car like a lifeline. His mom opened the door with her usual warmth, offering us lemonade, asking about school, commenting on how tired Eli looked. He waited until we were sitting at the kitchen table, half-finished drinks in front of us, when he just said it. "I'm dating someone," he said, "and it's a guy." She blinked. Not shocked, exactly, but processing. Then her eyes moved to me. "You?" I didn't speak. I didn't know if I was supposed to. Eli nodded. "Yeah, it's him." A long pause. Too long. Then she let out a breath and said, "Well, I always thought something was up with how often you talked about your roommate." Eli looked stunned. "Wait, what?" She smiled. Small, but genuine. "You used to call him, just to tell him what kind of coffee you bought. That's not normal, straight roommate behavior." I laughed before I could help it, the tension in the room evaporating all at once. "You're not mad?" Eli asked. She shook her head. "I'm not anything but your mom, and if you're happy, then that's all I care about." When we left, he didn't say much in the car, but he kept my hand in his, thumb tracing slow circles on the back of mine, and I could feel the relief radiating off of him like heat. That night, back in our apartment, we curled up on the couch, Chinese takeout balanced on our knees, a dumb movie playing in the background. He nudged me. "You know what's weird?" "What?" "I used to think if I ever ended up with a guy, it'd feel like giving something up." I looked over. "And now?" "Now it feels like I finally stopped pretending." He took a bite of his food, chewed, swallowed, and then said, "I used to think I was straight." "You were straight," I teased. "Until you weren't." He grinned. "Now I'm just yours." I smiled, leaned over, and kissed him. There wasn't anything confusing about that. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd fall for my straight roommate and that he'd fall right back, I would have laughed you out of the room. I would have said, "That's not real life. That's a fantasy people write about on Reddit." But here we were, 8 months into living together, 3 months into being, well, more. And somehow, it felt like this had been quietly building from the very beginning. I started noticing it in the way he'd linger in the hallway after saying goodnight, or the way he'd glance at me from across the room like he was seeing me differently. Like something inside him had shifted, and he didn't quite know what to do about it. And now? Now, Eli kissed me before work without worrying if someone saw. He held my hand in public. Tentatively at first, then with a growing kind of confidence. He didn't flinch when people asked who I was. He just said it straight out, every time. "My boyfriend." That word still hit me like a warm wave. Boyfriend. It wasn't perfect, of course. We had our moments. There were still times he'd pull back, go quiet. Especially when something triggered that old uncertainty. A comment from a classmate. A look from a stranger. The pressure of being out in a world that still loved boxes and labels. But he always came back. Always showed up. That's what made it real. One night in late spring, we had friends over for dinner. Our little makeshift crew of misfits from school, neighbors, the guy from the coffee shop downstairs who had somehow become a regular in our circle. We crammed into our too small apartment, music playing low, laughter spilling out into the hallway, and for the first time, Eli didn't separate himself, didn't play it cool. He poured wine for everyone, passed out plates, and introduced me to someone new as his partner. No hesitation. I caught his eye across the room afterward. He gave me that look again, the one I used to misread as confusion, but now knew was something else entirely: love. After everyone left, we cleaned up together in that quiet way people who live together do. Me stacking dishes, him drying. Our hips bumping now and then, each time a little more intentional. He reached for the last glass, then paused, watching me for a long second. "What?" I asked, drying my hands. He didn't answer right away, just stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne and the faint hint of red wine on his breath. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Okay." "I thought I'd never have this," he said quietly. "Like, this kind of connection. This kind of real. You thought you were straight." I reminded him with a smile. He grinned. "Yeah, I did." He reached out and took my hand. "I didn't know what I was looking for until I found you." I swallowed, throat tight. "I love you," he said. Not dramatic, not loud, just true. "I love you too," I said, and then he kissed me. Slow, deep. The kind of kiss that says, "This is home now." We didn't move that night, just curled into each other on the couch, limbs tangled, soft murmurs between yawns and kisses. The hum of the city outside our window felt like background noise to something bigger. He fell asleep first, head tucked into my neck, breath warm against my collarbone. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how much had changed. How a random question, "Do you think I'm attractive?" had cracked everything open. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just experimentation. It was the beginning of something. Something honest. Something unexpected. Something real.